difficult and repetitive with an entertaining theme and a captivating art style. Welcome back to the vault-covered wastelands after yet another apocalypse has claimed the vast majority of humanity. Time to get wasted. The story is along the lines of humanity attempted to hide in bunkers to try and avoid the nuclear fallout, but unfortunately it didn't work and only the dumbest and most deranged survived, and fight to try and get their hands on booze and toilet paper. Gameplay itself is very similar to almost every other difficult permadeath roguelike on the market, and virtually identical to the vault looting seen in the recent Fallout games, with a heavy emphasis on the looting. This game I believe stands out from the crowd to some greater or lesser degree because of its unusual art style, which was clearly inspired by Borderlands aside from the exceptionally cartoony characters with huge heads. As the game is also set in the 80s, it also has a lot of bright colours and neon lights which make for a colourful and charming appearance, which is rarely seen in the gloomy surroundings of a nuclear apocalypse. The retro stylings also continue through to the soundtrack, which is continually beating in the background, and occasionally interrupted by boomboxes spurting out songs usually with lewd but amusing lyrics. It is clear that the entire game has been crafted around the tongue-in-cheek humour, most obviously just looking at the ridiculous overarching story, but the characters that you meet along the way also give you ridiculous quests such as creating a merkin for a man who has mutated a second head. My gripe with the dialogue in the game is that it is often long-winded due to speech impairments which are intended to be funny but quickly get irritating as they ramble on and on while not telling you that much and spurting very hit-or-miss jokes. But let's move on to the gameplay. Well, it's a very standard first-person shooter to start off with, but as you develop your character through a run, you'll find that you can't play it in quite the same way as others. So the idea is that along your run, you collect loot and encounter attractive looking neon green drinks which change your statistics for better or for worse, of which there are two types. One remains for your current run, and the other is a permanent stat change but is your only way out of this hellhole. This means that if you're running the same character for a long period of time and leave the vault to trade or store some of your loot, you will find that it's more difficult to aim, move, and generally make your way through. The only way to reset this is to let your character die. The downside to this being that you lose every single item you're holding, but this is the whole reason for the courier and stash systems which allow you to pass items from one character onto the next. To put it simply, unlike in most games, your character doesn't develop. Instead, you rely on keeping the most valuable items and gambling how far you can carry them through the vaults, leaving you with a loot-driven development system. There is a good amount of loot to choose from, though again it has practically been stripped straight out of Fallout, with various raider costumes and weaponry being direct copies. On the weaponry front, I have to say, although I've only managed to get my hands on a shotgun once, it is incredibly satisfying to use as it does shed loads of damage, sends enemies flying, and lets loose an almighty boom every time. There are also some green rubber ducks which you can throw at your enemy for little to no effect. But what do you expect when you throw a rubber duck at an armor-plated psychopath? The enemies almost entirely consist of varieties of raiders which are usually armed and capable of sending you flying with relative ease in almost all cases, sometimes straight into a conveniently placed trap which you left active in the hope of leading them into it. However, the addition of mutations for dogs as they pass through nuclear waste into gigantic mutant mummy dogs which when killed burst into lots of small dogs which explode on contact and slow you down is much appreciated. These are quite reminiscent of Snarks from Half-Life 1 thinking about it. The game is completely stable but is lacking a gamma setting which without using my graphics card drivers to adjust the gamma it was virtually unplayable, although I have seen a response from the developer saying that this is likely to appear in the first patch. The main problem here is that Wasted is entering into an overpopulated genre with marginally different mechanics and competing with well-established and more extensive games. I would say that content-wise it has enough to justify the asking price as there is a huge amount of replayability on offer here. The problem I had is the difficulty seems so steep that it feels like I'm making very little to no progress at all. It's a good game that definitely grows on you the more you play it, and the humour, although inconsistent, does give it a slight edge, but it feels like it's stuck too close to the norm and could have been much more if it had been a little bit more adventurous with its mechanics. You could say it has wasted potential.